Serbian super agent arrives. Illustrated 4-page article in the Nedeljni Telegraph, Belgrade, April 19, 2006. Serbian super agent arrives who is Slobodan Mitrić, better known as Karate Bob, who after 33 years will be extradited by the Dutch authorities on April 26. When I heard that I was the one to assassinate Vlado Radojevic, some strange feeling of joy came over me. I was overwhelmed by pride. I thought, if I could achieve this, all my dreams about my future life would come true. Slobodan Mitrić wrote in his memoirs about the events that were to entirely change his life 30 years ago, when he was recruited by TITO'S UDBA to shadow and deal with Yugoslav emigrants at that time, just 2 days before the day that he was supposed to complete his assignment. Mitrić could not even dream that he would do what he did within the organization that considered this to be a major felony. Not only that he decided not to carry out his assignment, but that he told in face of his victim who he was and what his orders were, even after Radojevic had calmly told him, "Shoot and kill me." Radojevic showed understanding for his assassin. He never stated publicly how he survived that day or what the name was of the young man who spared his life. He only told his closest friend once that his assassin spared his life. I know what that means. I was president of the Marshal Court during the Second World War. The hardest decision of all was to sentence someone to death, Radojevic said, without revealing the identity of his assassin. Several days ago, it was announced that Slobodan Mitrić would be extradited to Serbia on April 26 after 33 years' residence in the Netherlands. Mitrić was said to be the founder of the Yugoslav Mafia in Amsterdam and the Netherlands. According to the Dutch police, he has an extraordinary biography. And it definitely is. In the following article, the Nedeljni Telegraph will reveal the most interesting details from the testimony of this controversial Serb, hired by the services 10 days after his decision not to assassinate Radojevic. All Dutch newspapers on December 25, 1973 brought the news that Slobodan Mitrić killed 3 of his countrymen in a shooting incident considered to be a settlement in the underworld. He was sentenced to 13 years in prison. In his defense, Mitrić said that these men were TITO'S agents sent to liquidate him for not completing his assignment. Before this, Mitrić had already failed to carry out an assignment that did not please his bosses in Belgrade. His mission was to liquidate a Czech emigrant Marko Milinovic in Sweden. But the man did not show up at the pre-arranged meeting. Mitric's history begins when, as an excellent karate sportsman and carrier of the black belt, he was partly forced, partly on his own will, recruited into the Yugoslav Secret Service. His first assignments were to connect with IB emigrants in Bucharest, where he gained their trust. After this, UDBA transferred him to Scandinavia, where he disarmed and captured the Croat nationalist Tomislav Rebrina in 1971. 1 year later, Rebrina, together with several of his followers from the Ustasha emigration community, hijacked a Swedish airplane and demanded the immediate release of the assassins of Vladimir Rolovic, the Yugoslav ambassador in Sweden, Miroslav Bezic and the others. This demand was fulfilled. Mitrić stayed in Sweden, where he worked as a security guard in nightclubs, but he was constantly followed by the Swedish secret police that sought his cooperation. In Sweden, he was imprisoned for several fights and alleged rape. The same case would be repeated later in the Netherlands. Mitrić strongly denied both of them, together with several other accusations from Sweden. While in prison, he wrote 2 books, Belgrade Underground, and Bible for a Man Without Faith. He continued to write several years later, when he was sentenced for 13 years for the murder of 3 of his countrymen, but also afterwards. In these books, he revealed some details from his life, but also his role in some developments, especially in the fight against international terrorism. connections with the CIA in his books, Mitrić gave a prominent place to three topics. Information about September 11th, which he revealed in the book Operation Twins. The second one being the role of the then Dutch Prime Minister Ruud Lubbers in the so-called plutonium affair in the mid-80s, and lastly the fight against agents of TITO'S UDBA. Besides this, Mitrić emphasized his close connections with U.S. General Raymond Healy, who was allegedly a former CIA director for Europe and Asia and who selected Mitrić to work for the International Association of Reserve Police International. Mitrić wrote numerous books. The Dutch Mafia, Tito's Murder Machine, The Bible for the Man Without Faith, The Battle of Kosovo, Operation Twins, together with several karate manuals. In his books, he wrote about several fascinating, daring and almost fantastic events. He directly addressed General Momcilo Perisic after the Neighbor affair, claiming that he personally knew Neighbor from the times that he served in The Hague, giving his address and phone number, and stating that he used to be very close to a general of Serbian origin whose name is Slobodan Kovačević. In this context, Mitrić claims that he personally handed to the then U.S. ambassador in The Hague, Paul Bremer, later the first governor in Iraq, a list of 100 names of American citizens who were, according to information from several double agents from the Dutch Secret Service, producing biological weapons in preparation for an attack on American soil. He did that in the presence of one of the directors of the Dutch Secret Service, Abel Kuiper. He handed in the list, Mitrić said, on the personal demand from his friend, CIA General Healy. Mitrić's manuscripts were confiscated by the Dutch police. This was particularly so in the case of his book, The Dutch Mafia, that he published in Dutch and English. This book was not translated into English. Note TR. In this book, he states that at the beginning of the 80s he personally met the then Prime Minister Ruud Lubbers, who was later discharged as UN High Commissioner. The plutonium affair. Mitrić claimed to have discovered a criminal organization among several Dutch ministries that were selling nuclear material and nuclear technology to Arab countries. Following Lubbers' instructions given through his assistant Jos Kibom, he personally mediated in the transaction of 60 kg of plutonium, from which 6 kg was sold to Sheikh Sabadi Hussein for $500 million. At the end of last year, there were some statements in the Dutch press that the Pakistan scientist Omar Khan, who created the Islamic nuclear bomb, at that time received in the Netherlands the necessary information and nuclear technology to create it. Mitrić was to get in return numerous material privileges and Dutch citizenship. Nevertheless, he accused Lubbers of not fulfilling their agreement and that from the moment on he had no legal rights in the Netherlands, nor rights for political asylum or citizenship. Even though he was married to a Dutch woman Iris Mitrić de Vries for more than a decade, and that he has no working permit, no medical insurance, nor social security, the Dutch government tried to extradite Mitrić to Yugoslavia back in 1986. But after the intervention by the Dutch Red Cross and a petition signed by 41 U.S. senators and congressmen, among whom were Senator Bob Doyle and Congressman Philip Crane, it decided against it. Mitrić assured them that a death sentence is awaiting him in Belgrade because of his betrayal and disclosure of the service's top secrets. Robert Kelder from the Willy Harm Institute, named in honor of the original founders of the Dutch royal family of Orange, states that Mitrić attempted to commit suicide at the time. In the same year, 1986, Mitrić received a PhD from a police university in Arizona. Kelder claims that it is totally clear, based on the documents he has, that both trials against Mitrić, the one in Sweden as well as the one in Holland, were doubtful and based on false accusations. Mitrić himself accused, among others, a distinguished American businessman of Serbian origin, Mr. as the one behind the problems he had in Sweden, claiming that he was a double agent for the Yugoslav Secret Service and the CIA. At a meeting he attended with several Scandinavian agents in the 70s, this businessman was also present with no explanation as to how or why. And this made Mitrić suspicious of him. In his journal, The Serbian Army, that he published during the 90s, Mitrić accused this American businessman of being a new DBA agent, and the late Slobodan Milosevic of being a CIA agent. Mitrić met this American businessman only twice. The first time was when Mitrić allegedly beat him up because of the lies this man told about him, and the second time on February 1, 1972, at the metro station in Stockholm where they apologized to each other, Mitrić for beating him up, and the businessman for presenting Mitrić in a bad light. Robert Kelder also published Mitrić book, Operation Twins, which was announced as a spy thriller, but which actually contains large parts from Mitrić life. Mitrić claims, among other things, that the attack on the World Trade Center was planned as a Millennium attack on December 31, 1999, but that it was discovered and therefore postponed. 1. The book was presented at the International Press Center in The Hague in March 2005. The publisher announced that the author would not be attending the press conference, because he was warned not to do so. According to the Dutch Minister of Justice, Mitrić would be completely safe in Serbia, where he will arrive next week. Mitrić legal advisor H. Sarali said that the extradition of this former secret agent is an inhuman action, because his life is in great danger. The mystery of Radojevic's case while jailed in a Swedish prison sentenced for assault and rape. Mitrić received a letter from his superiors in which they asked him to contact Uncle, a code name for Marko Milanovic in Sweden. Vlada Radojevich was always called Gaffer. I wrote to Milanovic and I sent him a recording of old Serbian songs. Milanovic sincerely thanked me in a letter. He could never imagine that I was the one getting ready to cut off his head. Obrad Gukovic ordered me to entrap him to Uppsala. I was surprised that they asked me to go all the way there when I could easily clear him up in vast areas. I wrote to Milanovic from Uppsala under the name of Radojev Kovacevic. My boss Gukovic sent me a passport with this name from Yugoslavia. Milanovic replied to my letter, but as an old and cautious emigrant wisely refused to come to Uppsala. My bosses saw this as a failure. They sent me a serious admonition and ordered me to destroy all the material I had with me and to immediately return to Yugoslavia. Upon my arrival to the country, Gukovic welcomed me as an enemy. He even refused to shake my hand. Instead of greeting me, he said, "So, you came after all, you traitor." This was not the same Gukovic who used to be so nice to me and glorified my qualities as a spy. He rudely ordered me not to leave Belgrade and to wait there for further orders. Then he perfidiously and skillfully set up an attack on me. A group of his employees attacked me one evening in Skardalia, hitting me over the head with bricks. His revenge would perhaps have even been worse had my father not personally asked for help from our cousin Rados Nedic, a high-ranking UDBA administrator in Novi Sad. Nedic undertook a lengthy interrogation asking me in detail what I had done and finally deciding to help me out and give me one more chance to go back to Sweden and amend my mistakes. First, they sent me to Holland, after which I went to Sweden to liquidate Stipe Mikulic and another Croat. For this purpose he gave me a new passport under the name Obrad Juric. He also told me that Marko Milanovic was no longer dangerous and that the information about him was false, so he now even knew what Milanovic had for breakfast. Mitric said about his case. Later on, Nedic changed his plan. He gave Mitric 3,000 German marks and ordered him to immediately go to Holland and continue afterwards to Norway, more precisely to Oslo, where Nedic would wait for him in Hotel de Ribo. He arrived in Holland in mid-September 1973, and went on to Norway where, after some delay, he did meet Nedic. Nedic ordered him to go back to Holland and try to become close friends with his other agent Sasako Lakovic, and set up their next meeting in Holland. A hazardous assignment, while waiting for Nedic. I went one day to the restaurant, Boomerang, where I accidentally met two young men. They told me they were Macedonians, that their names were Batka and Marco, and that they came here on a tour as tourists, which actually meant they were criminals. I became friends with them and got them to work for me, by a pure twist of fate. These two were with me when my life was in great danger on the orders of the almighty UDBA. Finally, my new boss Rados Nedic arrived. He took me to some quiet restaurant and pompously stated me it was decided that I were to go to Brussels and kill Vlado Dapčević. He told me to find Bora Blagojevic in Brussels, who owns the restaurant Sarajevo there, and that he will put me in touch with Dapčević. I got Vlado's phone number, according to my deal with Nedic. When I spoke with Dapčević on the phone for the first time, I told him my name was Zoran Jovanovic and that I wanted to bring him greetings from Slobodan Kovačević and Milan Zuban from Romania. This was enough for Dapčević, and he immediately made an appointment to receive me. Nedic sent me a gun through his messenger, a Colt revolver. Everything was ready and the realization of the big plan was just ahead of me. Through the same messenger who brought the guns, Nedic ordered me to go to Brussels on December 16, 1973, to visit Dapčević, and that as soon as he would open the door, I should riddle him with bullets and run away as fast as possible, not back to Holland but to Munich. He would meet me there at a pre-arranged place. This change of plan turned Mitrić suspicious. Why was he supposed to go to Brussels all alone? He started to suspect that perhaps Nedic wanted to have him filled up with bullets together with Dapčević. This really made me angry. But I managed to hold my anger back and not show it in front of Nedic messenger. So, although not willingly, I controlled myself and decided to go to Brussels and finish with the murder once and for all and prove to everyone that I'm not a traitor. I arrived in Brussels on December 16th. I took with me Marco the Macedonian. I left him waiting for me in a restaurant owned by some woman named Aura. I told Marco I had to finish some jobs in the city. He asked me why I was so pale. If I were sick or something. I explained to him that it must be because of a cold I had. Marco knew nothing about the reason for my visit. I encouraged myself and tried to calm my conscience, telling myself that Dapčević was an enemy and the biggest villain of our country, that he wanted to destroy my father, my grandfather, my uncle, ruin my brother, my sister and our whole nation. This gave me back the strength to kill without mercy, Mitrić said. When he arrived at the restaurant, he phoned Dapčević, who gave him his address, Avenue George Bergman. He took a taxi and went there. But on the way dark thoughts befell him. He felt he would be liquidated, together with his victim. I started to hesitate and ask myself strange questions. I tried to dismiss these thoughts energetically. As soon as Dapčević would show up at the door, I decided to immediately start shooting. I already saw him in my mind falling helplessly on the floor, shot dead with my gun. Again something whispered in me asking if it was right to kill an old powerless man in this way. Then I encouraged myself again and calmed my conscience by saying that Dapčević is the biggest enemy and villain of our country. This brought the strength back to kill him without mercy. I was interrupted from these thoughts when the taxi stopped in front of the 3-story building where Dapčević lived. Mitrić described to shoot an old man when he rang the interphone. He heard his voice, "Come upstairs. I live on the 2nd floor. I will wait for you in front of my door." He went up the stairs easily. He arrived in front of Dapčević's door, but he had not come out yet. He rang the bell. He put his hand in his pocket and held the gun that was loaded and unlocked. All he needed was the open door and everything would be done, over, in a minute. Instead, something else happened. Mitrić described this event with the following words: "Suddenly, the door opened and I froze at the sight of Radojevic, who spoke to me with a smile and a warm voice. Zdravstvui, Tovarish." My hand dropped the gun and unconsciously grabbed Radojevic, open hand. "Hello, Uncle Vlado," I said with joy while a big and warm appeared on my face. Prior to this, I used to stay cold as a rock and totally in control of myself in similar situations. The big smile and warmth of Vlado's eyes totally mesmerized me and probably evoked some human feelings in me, deeply hidden in my subconscious. His face reminded me of the face of our big national hero Sava Kovacevic. Radojevic had grey hair. He was over 60 years old, but he looked older. His face showed traces of the hard life in war and in prison. His eyes shone like torches. An immense trust came out of these eyes, even though he saw me for the first time. He grabbed my hand as if I were his son. He invited me in and offered me a glass of rakia, brandy. We were alone. We started to talk. I was really surprised about my own reaction. "Shoot. What are you waiting for?" spoke the man in me, the one hungry for blood and fame, a hitman paid by UDBA. The other man told me to wait a while and talk some more with this noble old man. I made a mistake and listened to this second man. That was my big weakness and mistake, but I am proud of it today. Suddenly, I felt like being on a trial and heard the voice of my awakened conscience. "You are a murderer. Your victims are not murderers. You are the one who is the murderer together with the ones that pay you to kill." We talked for almost an hour. Vlado's eyes became even warmer and his smile even bigger. He spoke about his wife and his child. I gathered all my courage, looked him straight in the eyes and told him who I was and why I came. I suppose my face again showed that expression you have before liquidating a powerless victim. But this wonderful old man didn't even scream or move from his place, and his eyes were saying, "Okay, then shoot me, an old man." I looked at the floor repentantly, and my body sunk. Suddenly, I became as soft as a lamb and with penitence started to confess to this old man, whom I saw for the first time in my life and for whose blood I was so thirsty minutes ago. He was surprised that UDB knew everything about him. I didn't give him the name of any of my superiors. I wasn't ready for all that. I promised to call him again. Suddenly, some strange feeling came into my body and soul. Everything around me seemed fresh and new, beautiful and strange. Vlado followed me to the street. I took a taxi and soon met Marco. At 6 o'clock we were in a train heading to Holland. In Brussels behind us, stayed Vlado Radojevic alive and healthy. And what would happen to me, I didn't want to know. I felt a hitherto unknown feeling of freedom and I wanted to flavor it as long as I could. I happily started to sing a song. Marco looked at me stunned, because that horrible pale face of mine was gone. The chains I put on myself, I freed myself from as well. The events that followed on December 25th at Café Mostar in Amsterdam were noted by the Dutch press as a settlement within the Yugoslav mafia. The shooting started at that cafe, but continued in front of the restaurant Boomerang. The Dutch police charged Mitrić with 3 murders and he was sentenced to 13 years in prison. Besides this, the police did confirm that at least one of the 3 men killed had connections with TITO's secret service, BD Vlado Dapcevic. The most famous Yugoslav hitman Vlado Radojevic was born in 1917 in the village of Ljubotinje in Montenegro. He was a brother of a national hero and General Pico Radojevic. He was one of the first fighters against the Germans in Montenegro. In the first half of 1944, he was posted as a commissar of the officers' school at headquarters, and after that as a commissar of the 10th Army Division. He finished the war as a lieutenant colonel. After the war, he was a teacher at a high party school, and in 1947 Chief Commander for the Agitation and Propaganda Department of the Yugoslav People's Army's Directorate. After accepting the resolution of USSR Inform Bureau, in 1948, he attempted to leave the country, but failed. For some time he went into hiding in Belgrade, but was caught when attempting to leave the country again near the Hungarian border. He spent 22 months under investigation in prison. Army prosecutors receded twice to raise the case against him, so they also ended up at GEHEIM-AGENT. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. From June 1950 to December 1956, he was in the camps Stara Gradiška, Ilica, and GEHEIM-AGENT. Under the threat of getting arrested again, he escaped with a group of his friends to Albania. After several months, Albanian authorities sent them to the USSR. He left the USSR in 1966 and went to Western Europe. While staying in Belgium, France, Switzerland, and Holland, he survived by working as a simple manual laborer. At the same time, he tried to organize political activities among Yugoslav economic migrants, but without success. The police of these Western countries arrested him several times and extradited him from one country to another. Not until 1969 did he get a residence permit to stay in Belgium. The Yugoslav and Romanian police collaborated in Bucharest in 1975 and organized his kidnapping, in which 2 of his friends were killed. He was sentenced to death in Yugoslavia, but this was changed to 20 years in prison. He was released from solitary confinement from prison in Požarevac in June 1988 and expelled from Yugoslavia, after the ban to return to the country was lifted. Dačović came back to Yugoslavia in September 1990. In numerous interviews and public appearances he warned of the dangers of the escalation of war and the disintegration of Yugoslavia. He died in 2001. Caption of the facsimile of the Lovers' letter. Mitrić claims that he participated, with the knowledge of Dutch Prime Minister Lubbers, in the mission of unmasking some of their politicians who sold nuclear technology to the Arabs. Nedeljni Telegraph hereby brings a copy of the reply of Dutch Prime Minister Lubbers to Mitrić, letter in the middle of the plutonium affair. Dear Mr. Mitrić, I have received your letter dated October 19, 1984 concerning the exchange of spies. You can be assured that this subject has my full attention. Best regards, RFM Lubbers.